Story 1. The Lost and Found office started returning things I never lost. The Lost and Found office sits beneath City Hall. Most people don't know it's there. Doesn't have a sign, just a small plaque near the stairwell that reads, Public Services Lower Level. I only discovered it because I lost my wallet. It was a simple problem, really. I noticed my wallet was missing after work. I didn't panic. There was no mad rush. I just calmly retraced my steps, checked my car, my desk, and my apartment. Nothing. So the next morning, I went down to City Hall. The security guard didn't even ask why I was there. He just pointed me downstairs like he already knew. The Lost and Found office wasn't what I expected. There was no counter, no shelves piled high with forgotten umbrellas or stray keys. It was just a waiting room with 6 plastic chairs and a single desk. Behind it sat a woman, probably in her 50s, calmly sorting through a box of index cards. She didn't even look up when I walked in. Name? She asked, her voice flat. I told her. She gave a slow nod. Item, my wallet. She paused. Date lost. Yesterday, she wrote something down on one of the cards. Then she asked something I didn't see coming. Do you remember when you first noticed it was missing? Yes, I said. You remember how you felt? I had to think about that for a second. Relieved, I admitted. A little anyway. I didn't need it right away. She wrote that down too, without any reaction. Then, she opened a drawer beside her. It wasn't labeled, wasn't locked. She just reached inside and handed me my wallet. It was mine, no doubt. Same scuff marks on the leather. Same bent corner from being in my back pocket. The contents were all there. I thanked her, feeling a little weirded out. As I turned to leave, she said, "Check the receipt." Inside my wallet, there was a small slip of paper. It wasn't a store receipt. It was more like a claim tag. It read, "Item returned, personal identifier, time out of possession, 17 hours, associated loss, minimal." And at the bottom, in tiny print, it said, "Thank you for your cooperation." I just assumed it was some strange government system. Bureaucracy at its finest. Over-documentation for the sake of it. I crumpled up the paper and threw it away. I didn't think about it again. Not for 3 days anyway. The second item arrived without me losing a thing. I came home from work to find a small envelope taped to my front door. No address, no postage. Inside was my old house key. The one from my very first apartment, a place I'd moved out of 10 years ago. I hadn't seen that key in years. Attached to the key was another one of those slips. Item returned. Access token. Time out of possession. 9 years. Associated loss. Moderate. My hands started to shake a little. I hadn't lost that key. I'd abandoned it. I'd left it on the counter for the landlord on my way out. I went straight back to the Lost and Found office. Same chairs, same desk, same woman sorting her cards. She didn't look surprised to see me. In fact, she spoke first. "You received something early," she said. "I didn't report this," I told her, holding up the key. She just nodded. "Not all losses are reported, but I didn't lose this key," I insisted. "You stopped carrying it," she replied calmly. "You stopped remembering it daily. Eventually, you stopped knowing where it was." She finally looked up from her cards, and her eyes met mine. That qualifies. She pulled out a folder from another drawer. My name was typed neatly on the tab. Inside there were dozens of index cards. Each one had a description, dates, durations, and a level of associated loss. I recognized some of the items listed, but I didn't recognize others at all. That's when I saw the cards for items that weren't objects. One card read, "Item, sense of direction, time out of possession, for years. Associated loss. Noticeable," another one said. "Item, confidence when speaking to strangers. Time out of possession, 11 years. My chest tightened. "These aren't things," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "They're yours," she replied, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Why now?" I asked her. "Why are you returning them now?" She went back to sorting the cards. "Accumulation," she said. "Eventually, retention exceeds capacity." "Capacity for what?" "For holding what you no longer carry." She leaned forward just a little, her expression serious. "When an item is returned," she said, "it has to go somewhere. What if I don't want it back?" For the first time, she smiled. It was a gentle, almost sad smile. "Then it remains unclaimed." I had to ask, "And what happens to unclaimed items?" She pointed to a door behind her desk. I hadn't even noticed it before. It was just a seam in the wall, with no handle and no sign. "They're stored," she said, "for redistribution." That night something else appeared. It wasn't an object, it was a memory. Not a clear one, more like a feeling. A sudden, overwhelming familiarity with a song I didn't recognize. But I knew all the words. I remembered singing it loudly once, with someone. I just couldn't remember who. And there on my kitchen counter was the slip of paper. Item returned. Shared memory unnamed. Time out of possession. 14 years. Associated loss. Significant. I sat down hard. This wasn't something I had asked for. These returned things, they didn't feel like gifts, they felt inconvenient. Like someone had put old furniture back into a room I had completely rearranged. They disrupted my routines. Old emotions would resurface without any context. I'd have these feelings without any anchors, any reason for them to be there. A few days later, I was back in the waiting room, and I wasn't alone. I met another person, a man in his 30s who looked pale and completely exhausted. I asked him quietly, "What did you lose?" He swallowed hard. "My anger," he said. "Gave it back to me yesterday." I went up to the woman at the desk. I asked her what would happen if I just refused everything they sent me. She slid another card forward from my file. It read, "Item, capacity for loss. Status, approaching limit. You can't refuse forever," she told me. "Eventually something else has to leave to make room." So they let me choose. Not everything, but they let me set priorities. Old ambitions I'd let go of. Certain attachments I'd moved on from. I signed forms I didn't understand, initialing next to parts of myself I barely even remembered having. The next day, I noticed something was missing. It wasn't a memory or an old key. It was a weight, certain seriousness I'd carried with me since my 20s. It was just gone. It felt lighter. It felt wrong, but it also felt functional. And then this morning I received another envelope. It was heavier than the others. Inside, there was no item. There was just a card. Item pending return. Original self-concept. Time out of possession. Unknown. Associated loss. Total. I'm telling you this because I haven't decided whether to claim it. I've built an entire life around the things I lost, the person I became without them, carefully, efficiently. If they give that original self back to me, I have no idea where it would fit. So, if you ever find something you didn't realize you'd lost, maybe ask yourself why it disappeared in the first place. Because some things aren't taken from you. They're just set down. And once someone starts keeping track of them for you, expect you to carry them again. Thanks for listening. If this story made you think, consider subscribing for more. Story 2. Everyone in my family appears in one photograph, even the ones still alive. The photo I found wasn't hanging on the wall, and that's what made it so strange. My grandmother framed every important picture: weddings, baptisms, funerals, you name it. If it mattered, it was on display. This one, though, was hidden away in a drawer beneath her sewing table. I only found it because I was looking for spare buttons. It was an old photograph, black and white, with the edges slightly warped. At first glance, it looked like a typical family portrait from the early 1900s, 3 rows of people, all with stiff posture and serious faces. But then I saw my father. He was standing right there in the second row. He looked exactly as he did now, at 48 years old. The photograph, however, was dated 1912. I told myself it had to be a coincidence, just some man who looked like my father. But he had the same nose, the same crooked left eyebrow, and the same faint scar near his chin. Then I saw my aunt and my cousin, and then I saw myself. I was sitting on the ground in the front row, my hands folded, my eyes looking just slightly away from the camera. I was even wearing the same jacket I owned right now. I turned the photo over. On the back, written in careful, elegant cursive, were names. Every single person was labeled. Some names were scratched out, others were circled. Mine wasn't marked at all. And at the very bottom, a single sentence was written. All who belong will appear. All who appear will eventually belong. My grandmother was 92, with a mind as sharp as ever, even if her body was weak. I brought the photo to her. She stared at it for a long, unsettling time without blinking. Then she looked up and asked me a question I never expected. Did you find this, or did it let you find it? She told me that every family has a record, not a family tree, but a collection. Some families keep journals, others carve names into stone. Our family, she explained, kept a photograph. Just one. Always the same one. It updated itself. No one knew who took it. The photographer was never in the image and never signed a name. But the camera angle never changed. The location never changed. Either a dirt clearing bordered by bare, leafless trees. It was a place none of us remembered ever visiting. Yet everyone in the photo stood as if they recognized it, as if they knew exactly where they were. My grandmother explained the rules to me calmly, as if she were reciting a recipe. If you are born into the family, you may appear in the photograph. If you appear, you are being prepared. When your name is scratched out, your place is finalized. And when you disappear from the photo entirely, you are no longer alive. I asked her how long people stayed in the picture. She just said, as long as needed. I looked closer at the scratched out names on the back. I recognized some of them relatives who had died young, but others were a surprise. A great-uncle who supposedly moved abroad, a cousin no one ever spoke about. Their names were scratched out violently, as if someone didn't want them to be readable anymore. The circled names, she said, belonged to living family members. My father's name was circled twice. My mother's once. My sister's had a small question mark beside it. What do the circles mean? I asked. My grandmother sighed deeply. They're close. She wouldn't explain what close meant at first. But then she told me about her brother. First appeared in the photograph when he was 16 and lived a long life, all the way to 84. But for the last 10 years, he said he felt called. He felt a constant pull toward a place he couldn't quite remember. The closer that pull felt, the darker the circle around his name became in the photo. My name, however, was clean. No circle, no scratches, no marks at all. And that scared me more than anything else. What does it mean if there's nothing? I asked her. My grandmother closed her eyes. It means you haven't been noticed yet. That night, I tried to destroy it. I held a lighter to the corner of the photograph. The edges curled up and the surface blackened with soot, but the faces, the people, didn't disappear. Then the fire just went out on its own. When I picked up the photo, it was completely untouched. It was cool to the touch, and it felt heavier than before. The next morning, someone new was in it. A small child standing right beside my sister. The child had the same eyes, the same posture. I don't have children. Sister doesn't either. Yet the name was written clearly on the Baka name I had been planning to use for my own child someday. Then I started dreaming of the clearing. Not vividly, just fragments. The smell of damp leaves. The feeling of standing perfectly still for a very long time. I'd wake up sore, as if I'd been holding a difficult pose all night. Each morning I would check the photo, and each morning the image seemed just a little bit sharper. My father grew quiet, withdrawn. He'd stand in doorways for too long, staring out at the trees as if they were familiar friends. When I checked the photo again, the circle around his name had darkened into a thick, black ring. It was almost a scratch. I asked my grandmother what happens when someone finally leaves the photo. She said they don't die immediately. First they go. The body follows later. We found the clearing by accident after taking a wrong turn on a winding back road. The trees thinned out, and the ground dipped into a familiar space. I knew it before I even saw it. The angle, the spacing of the trees, the way the light fell. My father stepped out of the car without saying a word and walked forward. Standing there felt like relief, like finishing a long, difficult sentence. In that moment, I understood why people in the photo didn't fight it. I understood why they stood so still. The photograph wasn't capturing them, it was collecting them. My grandmother explained that the scratched-out names meant resistance. They belonged to people who fought the pull, who tried to leave the family or run from their place in the photos. People who wouldn't stand still long enough. They were still taken, of course, just less cleanly. That night, my name changed. A faint circle appeared around it. It was barely visible, but it was unmistakably there, and I felt it immediately. A slight tug behind my ribs. A feeling of being counted, of being noticed. My grandmother finally confessed everything. She admitted she had tried to delay it for me. She moved the photo, covered it, kept it hidden, hoping it would forget me. But families don't lose members. They just postpone recognition. She told me I had to decide how I wanted to appear, calm, defiant, or just tired. I asked her what would happen if I just didn't go. She said the photo would still update. It would simply replace me with something else. A new child, a new name, or maybe a version of me that went willingly. I'm telling you all this now because the circle around my name is darker tonight, and because my sister, she's disappeared from the photo completely. There's an empty space opening up beside my father in the second row. I finally truly understand the sentence on the back. You don't inherit a family. You're archived by it. Recorded, stored, and displayed until the collection is finally complete. So if you ever find an old photograph that seems to keep updating itself, check the edges, check the names on the back. And if you see yourself there, unmarked, it just means you still have time to decide how you'll stand. Thanks for listening. Story 3. The town that only exists while you're driving through it. I wasn't supposed to be on that road. My GPS recalculated after a missed exit and sent me down this narrow 2-lane highway. There were no streetlights, and of course, no cell signal. Trees pressed in close on both sides, their branches arching overhead like the ribs of some colossal skeleton. The dashboard clock flickered, and then the road straightened out. Suddenly there was a town. The sign said, "Welcome to Harrow's Pass." No population number, no founding date, just a smaller line beneath it. Drive slow. Stay aware. I eased my foot off the gas. The air felt different, almost instantly. It was like the car had just crossed into a sealed room, heavy and still. Harrow's Pass wasn't abandoned, not at all. Lights glowed softly behind windows. A diner sat on the corner, its neon sign buzzing in the twilight. A gas station stood across the street, the pump handles swaying just slightly, even though there was no wind. But there was something deeply wrong. There were no parked cars, only moving ones. Everyone was driving, slowly circling the same 4 streets in a silent procession. No one parked. No one got out of their vehicle. They just drove, hands locked on the steering wheel, eyes staring straight ahead, their faces completely blank. They looked like commuters trapped in some kind of endless, mechanical loop. I pulled into the diner parking lot, my curiosity getting the better of me. The engine idled quietly. Through the large glass window I could see people. They were seated at booths, coffee cups raised to their lips, mouths open in the middle of conversations, but they were frozen, completely still. I reached for the door handle. It wouldn't budge. The open sign above the door flickered once, and then went dark. An urge to leave, powerful and immediate, washed over me. The moment my tires rolled back onto the street, everything resumed. People blinked. Cups lifted. Conversations continued as if a cosmic pause button had been released. It was horrifyingly clear. The town only functioned when observed from a moving vehicle. At the gas station on the corner, a man stood beside a pump. He waved as I approached. I slowed down instinctively. His smile widened, stretching unnaturally across his face. He pointed at my fuel gauge, which was hovering just above empty. Then he shook his head, slowly, firmly. It wasn't a greeting, it was a warning. I followed the road, trying to get out of town, or at least I thought I did. 5 minutes later, the "Welcome to Harrow's Pass" sign appeared again. But this time, the smaller text was different. It now read, "Stay aware, drive slow." The order had been reversed. A prickle of cold fear ran down my spine. I glanced at my watch. It was 5 minutes behind the dashboard clock. The radio crackled with static, but through it, I could hear fragments of voices. "You must keep. Don't stop. If you slow too much," I pressed the accelerator. The engine strained, but the town around me didn't seem to move any faster. It was like running in a dream. A car behind me honked once. It wasn't an angry sound, it was urgent. I checked my rearview mirror. The driver was a man, and he was staring directly at me, his eyes wide with panic. He was mouthing words, forming them with exaggerated care. I squinted, trying to read his lips. "Don't remember too much." I pulled over just slightly, my tires crunching on the gravel shoulder, but I didn't fully stop. I couldn't risk it. I opened the map app on my phone. Impossibly, a signal flickered to life, and there it was, Harrow's Pass. Population, in transit. Estimated time through town, unknown. Just then, a car ahead of me sputtered and stalled. coasting to a dead stop in the middle of the road. The driver, a woman, stepped out. The moment her feet touched the pavement, she froze. She wasn't stiff or rigid, just paused, like a buffering video. All the other cars, including mine, just continued circling around her, ignoring her completely. And as they did, the lights in the diner dimmed. The next time I looped around that block, the woman was gone. Her car was still there, but it looked different, rusted. Its doors hanging open, the interior empty. It was now just another piece of the scenery. The town had absorbed her, and the welcome sign had changed again. This time it read, "Welcome back." That's when I noticed something was wrong inside my own head. I couldn't remember where I was going before I took this road. I remembered my name, I remembered my car, but the destination felt hollow. It was like a word on the tip of my tongue that had been completely erased. On my fourth loop, a woman in the car beside me rolled down her window. Her face was calm, resigned. "You're still thinking?" she said, her voice soft but clear over the hum of our engines. "That's dangerous here. What is this place?" I asked, my voice shaking. She smiled, a sad, knowing expression. "It's not a place, it's a delay," she explained, never taking her eyes off the road ahead. Some roads collect people. Some towns process them. Harrow's Pass exists in the spaces between decisions, between wrong turns, regrets, and all the almosts of life. It keeps you moving until you forget why you ever needed to leave in the first place. "Can you get out?" I asked her, desperate. "Yes," she said. "But you lose something real. You pay a toll. What did you lose?" She paused for a long moment, her grip tightening on the steering wheel. "My daughter's face." Her words hit me like a physical blow. As I drove, the trees began to blur. The diner no longer held any interest. The honking from other cars had stopped. I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. Too calm. The road felt familiar, almost comforting. I caught myself smiling for no reason, and the realization terrified me more than anything else. Without warning, an exit ramp appeared on my right. It wasn't there on the last loop. There was no sign, just an arc of pavement leading into absolute darkness. The woman in the car next to me saw it too, and she screamed, her calm finally breaking. "Don't take IT if you remember me." My hands were shaking on the wheel. The ramp was pulling at me like gravity. Stay, and forget everything except the endless, numbing motion. Or leave, and lose something I hadn't even realized I loved yet. I took the exit. I woke up slumped over my steering wheel on the shoulder of a normal highway miles away. The sun was rising, my phone was working, the map was normal. But when I checked my contacts, there was a name I couldn't place. Woman. Hundreds of photos of her, of a child, all of them smiling with me. And I felt nothing, absolutely nothing. Sometimes even now, my GPS hesitates, it recalculates, suggests a shortcut down an unfamiliar road. And for just a moment, I almost remember why I shouldn't take it. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy stories that explore the strange and unsettling, consider subscribing for more. Story 4. The elevator that doesn't stop on every floor. The building didn't look wrong at first. It's just another high-rise of glass and steel, with clean lines that promised efficiency. 34 floors, the directory said. Offices on the lower levels, residential units up top. It was the kind of place that always smells faintly of cleaning solution and stale coffee. I noticed the first odd thing when I pressed the elevator button. It lit up immediately, as if it had been waiting for me. The doors slid open with a soft, polite chime. Inside, the elevator was spotless. No scuff marks, no lingering smells. But there were no mirrors, and no music. Just a plain digital panel above the doors displaying the floor number in a simple white light. I stepped in, alone, and pressed the button for floor 17. The doors closed. The elevator did not move. For a second, I thought it was broken. Then, the number on the panel changed. From 1, it jumped straight to 3. It had skipped 2 entirely. The elevator moved with a smooth, silent hum. The number changed again. From 3, it went to 5. Then from 5 to 8, it wasn't malfunctioning. It was being selective. It was choosing its path. I gave a nervous laugh and looked at the panel of buttons. Every floor was labeled correctly from G234. There was no emergency message flashing, no warning light blinking. It was all perfectly normal, except for the journey. When the display finally reached 17, the doors opened to my floor. Everything looked exactly as it should. Should have just forgotten about it, chalked it up to a quirky system. But I didn't. 2 days later, I rode the elevator again. This time, I wasn't alone. A woman in a gray coat stepped in with me on the ground floor. She clutched her phone so tightly her knuckles were white. She pressed 12. I pressed 17. The doors closed. The elevator began its ascent. 1, then 4. The woman frowned, looking from the panel back to me. "Does it always skip?" she asked. Before I could even begin to answer, the lights flickered once. The display jumped from 4 to 9, and she stopped breathing. I don't mean figuratively, I mean literally. Her chest was perfectly still. The elevator slowed. The display showed 11. Neither of us had pressed it. The doors slid open. The hallway outside was wrong. The carpet was a faded, ugly pattern with stains that looked like long, dried shadows. The lights buzzed and flickered unevenly. Doors lined the walls, but none of them had numbers. They were just blank, dark wood. The woman backed away from the opening, pressing herself into the corner of the elevator. "I didn't press 11, she whispered, her voice tight with panic. Neither had I. The doors began to close. As the doors slid shut, I caught a glimpse of movement in the strange hallway. Just a flicker. Someone or something standing just out of reach of the dim light, watching us. The display changed again. 11, then 12. The woman gasped, a huge, ragged breath, as if she'd been held underwater. The moment the doors opened at 12, she scrambled out, running down her normal-looking hallway without a word, without a single glance back. I didn't blame her. Over the next week, I started paying close attention. The elevator never skipped the same floors twice in a row. It was unpredictable. Sometimes it would stop on a floor nobody had selected. Sometimes it would just linger between floors, sitting in the dark shaft for what felt like an eternity, long enough for the lights to dim and the air to grow thick and heavy. I started taking the stairs. It was a long climb to the 17th floor, but it felt safer. Until one morning, I found the stairwell door locked. Someone had taped a piece of paper to the wall, next to the elevator buttons. The writing was shaky, the ink slightly smeared. It read, "If it stops somewhere you didn't choose, don't step out. If it skips your floor, don't complain, but it asks you to stay run." I went to building security and asked them to check the cameras. They found nothing. No one was ever recorded putting the note up. I met him on a Thursday night. An old man who smelled like dust and old paper got on with me. Press 6. The elevator started its journey, skipping 2, 3, 4, and 5. When the doors opened at 6, he didn't move. He just stood there, staring out. "I don't live there anymore," he said quietly, his voice raspy. "What do you mean?" I asked. The hallway looked normal. It's almost too normal, like a picture in a magazine. "It remembers me wrong," he said. Then the doors closed, and the elevator continued its ascent. He was still inside. Suddenly, the display flickered. The numbers vanished, replaced by letters. A single word glowed in the dim light. "Stay." The old man's face drained of all color. He looked utterly terrified. "Don't answer," he whispered, his eyes wide. My finger hovered near the control panel. There was no yes button. There was no no button. There was only the door open button. The elevator stopped. The doors opened. But it wasn't a hallway. It was a living room. My living room. From 10 years ago. The same worn-out couch, the same circular scratch on the coffee table from a mug I'd dropped, and on the wall, the same photograph one I had thrown away after the accident. The old man let out a short, choked scream. The doors began to close. The room seemed to breathe. The walls expanded and contracted slightly, like a pair of lungs. I felt a pull, a gentle but persistent tug toward the scene. The elevator wasn't just showing me a place, it was offering one. "You can't stay," the old man begged, his voice trembling. "It doesn't give it back the same." I slammed my palm against the door open button. The doors shuddered, resisted for a moment, and then snapped shut with a deafening bang. The elevator jolted violently. The lights went out completely, plunging us into absolute darkness. For a few seconds, there was nothing but the sound of my own frantic breathing. When the lights flickered back on, the man was gone. There was no sound, no struggle. It's just an empty space where he had been standing a moment before. As the display resumed its calm progression. 6, 9, 14. 17. When I stumbled out onto my floor, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely get my key in the lock. I didn't sleep that night. I had to know more. I spent hours online digging into the building's history, and I found it. There had been major renovations a decade ago. A fire years before that. During construction, one of the original elevator shafts had collapsed inward. They sealed it off, built over it. But they reused parts of the original control system for the new elevators. Some of the floors that the system was programmed for no longer physically existed. But the elevator, it seemed, still remembered them. The next morning, I cornered a maintenance worker in the lobby. He let out a long, weary sigh before I could even finish my question. "It only stops where something's unfinished," he said, not looking at me, but at the polished steel elevator doors. "Unfinished how?" I pressed. He finally turned. "People leave pieces of themselves behind," he said. "Grief, guilt, regret. The elevator finds the floor where it fits." "Where do they go?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The ones who disappear?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and handed me a small, strange-looking key. "Emergency override," he said. "It's a one-use-only deal." "What happens after I use it?" I asked. He gave a grim little shrug. "It chooses someone else." That night, it happened again. I got in the elevator, and without me pressing anything, it started to move. It stopped at 13. The doors opened to a hospital hallway. It was bright, sterile, and far too quiet. And at the far end of the hall, standing there was someone I hadn't seen in years. Someone who was gone. They were alive, they were smiling, and they were waiting for me. The display inside the elevator flashed again. "Stay." I took a step forward, onto the cold linoleum. The air smelled of antiseptic and false hope. The person at the end of the hall spoke my name, and it sounded exactly the way it used to. For one horrible, tempting second, I wanted it. I wanted that life. The version where nothing went wrong, where the world didn't break. The lie. My hand closed around the cold metal of the override key in my pocket. As my fingers tightened, the pristine hallway began to darken. The bright smile at the end of the hall faltered, twisting into something else. "That version isn't real," I said, to myself as much as to the vision. I shoved the key into the override slot and twisted. The elevator let out a high-pitched mechanical scream. A month later, the building management removed the elevator. The shaft was sealed, and now it stares only for everyone. People still complain, but fewer things happen now. People don't seem to disappear anymore. But sometimes, when I walk past the concrete wall that covers the old shaft, I swear I can still hear it. A soft chime, and a question, a whisper that seems to leak through the solid wall. "Stay." Story 5. There is a door in my house that only appears when I forget something. There's a door in my house that only appears when I forget something. I first noticed it on a morning when I was already late. You know the feeling? The frantic search for keys you swear you just had. I checked the kitchen counter. I dug through the couch cushions. I patted down my jacket pockets for the 10th time, nothing. That familiar frustration started to build, the kind that tightens your chest and makes the walls feel like they're closing in. And that's when I saw it. A narrow door at the end of the hallway. It definitely hadn't been there before. The strange thing is, I didn't panic. The door looked so ordinary. White paint, a simple brass knob, slightly scuffed at the bottom, like it had been kicked open 1,000 times. My brain just accepted it, as if it had always belonged there, and I'd simply stopped noticing it. There was no alarm, no sense of impossibility. It was just a door. So, I opened it. Inside was a small, empty room. No windows, no furniture, just a single solitary hook on the wall. Keys were hanging from it. I didn't question it. I didn't wonder how. I just felt this wave of relief. I grabbed them, closed the door, and left for work. When I came home that night, the door was gone. The wall was just a wall again. I told myself it was stress, sleep deprivation. My overloaded brain playing tricks on me, filling in the gaps. Old houses creak, hallways blur at the edge of your vision. That explanation worked for a while. It It was a good story, till it happened again. A week later, I forgot my neighbor's name. I'd lived next to her for 3 years. We'd shared small talk over the fence, borrowed tools, waved to each other in passing. But that morning, standing in the hallway, her name was just gone. A blank space in my head, and the door was back. Same spot, same scuffed paint waiting. This time the room inside was slightly larger, still empty except for a single folded piece of paper lying on the floor. I picked it up. Written neatly in pencil was her name, spelled correctly. The relief was so strong it almost made me dizzy. As I stood there catching my breath, I looked up. The room felt fuller, not like it was furnished, but like it was occupied, like something was in there with me. After that, I started to pay attention. I realized the door didn't appear randomly. It appeared only when I forgot something specific, not where I left my phone or what day it was. It was only 4 things that had some emotional weight, names of people I knew, significant moments, small, important details tied to relationships or decisions, the things that make up a life. I also started to notice a rule I'd missed at first. Each time the door appeared, the room changed. It grew deeper. The walls became a shade darker. Air felt heavier, more still. And each time, whatever I'd forgotten was waiting for me inside, carefully stored, perfectly preserved. I decided to test it. One evening, I deliberately tried to forget something. I picked an embarrassing memory from high school, one of those cringy moments that keeps you up at night, and I forced it out of focus. I distracted myself, refused to let my mind go there. The door did not appear. Forgetting had to be genuine, unintentional. That's what started to frighten me. This wasn't something I could control. Standing inside that room always felt wrong. Not threatening exactly, but unsettlingly intimate. Like I was standing inside someone else's thought. The walls absorbed all sound. My footsteps were muted, my own breathing barely audible. And I always had the sense that I was being given something back, but reluctantly. Like a loan I didn't remember asking for. One night I opened the door and found a familiar object on the floor, a watch. My father's, the one he wore every day before he died. I hadn't even realized I'd forgotten the image of it. I just stared at it for a long, long time. The silver band, the scratch on the crystal. Then I stepped back. I closed the door without taking it. The next day, I couldn't remember his voice. The door appeared again immediately. The room was much larger now. The watch was gone. In its place was a small, old-fashioned tape recorder. When I pressed play, my father's voice filled the silent room, laughing, telling a story, saying my name. I took it this time. I had to, and as I clutched it in my hand, the room felt pleased. That's when I finally understood. The door wasn't just returning things, it was holding them. It was a safekeeper for everything my mind was shedding. Memories slip. Details fade. That's natural. But the door caught everything that fell through the cracks, and it expected something in return for its services. The cost wasn't obvious at first, but after each visit, something else in my life felt slightly duller. A song I loved didn't hit the same notes in my soul. A photo of a happy memory felt less familiar, like looking at a stranger's vacation. Conversations started requiring more effort. I was becoming efficient, streamlined, unburdened. Then came the night I found a box. The room had expanded again, becoming a long corridor. In the middle of it sat a plain cardboard box, unlabeled. I opened it. Inside were dozens of items, photos I vaguely recognized, notes in handwriting that looked like mine, objects I knew were important but couldn't place. They were all the things I had forgotten and never gone back for. And at the very bottom of the box was something that wasn't mine. A child's drawing made with crayon, to stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. I felt a sharp, sudden grief, a wave of loss so powerful it buckled my knees. I didn't know why. I left the drawing where it was. I started to see the awful truth. The more I relied on the door, the less my mind bothered holding on to things on its own. Forgetting became easier, almost automatic. The door appeared more and more often. The room just kept growing. One night, it spoke to me. It's not with a voice, but with a feeling. A deep, quiet understanding that bloomed in my mind. You don't have to carry everything, it seemed to say. I can hold it for you. The relief it offered was so tempting, like a soft bed after a lifetime of walking. That night, I decided on one final test. I stood in the hallway and thought about the biggest thing I'd ever lost in my life. The memory surfaced for just a second, a bright flash of pain, and then it slipped away. The door appeared instantly. It was wider than ever before, a grand archway. Inside, the room stretched into darkness, farther than I could see. At the far end of the vast, empty space was a mirror, but it wasn't reflective. Its surface was opaque, like fogged glass on a cold morning, understood without being told. If I stepped far enough into that room, if I walked to that mirror, I wouldn't need to remember anything anymore. The door would do it all for me. I would be empty and full. I took one thing from the room that night. It's just one. A small, leather-bound notebook from the box, with a label on the front that read, "Why You Care." Then I turned around and I closed the door. Yeah, I forced myself to remember. Everything had hurt. It still hurts. The door hasn't appeared in weeks. I forget things again. Normally, humanly, I lose my keys. I forget names. Sometimes I can feel the space in the hallway where the room used to be. Like a missing tooth you can't stop probing with your tongue. I'm telling you this because if you ever notice a door that wasn't there yesterday, it offers to carry what you're tired of holding. Be careful. Some things are meant to fade for a reason, and some rooms don't want to stay empty forever. Thanks for listening.